So far, we're still only at about 20% of the pre-pandemic volumes in terms of outbound passengers from China. So we've got a long runway here.
Yeah, there is plenty room. That's why, based on our own projections, we see room for this ongoing recovery of outbound tourist spending from China lasting through this year and even 2024 as well. Now, it's interesting because domestic travel volumes are almost or pretty much back to where they were before. So there has been this divergence between the two, but it is an ongoing story. And I would argue that as we see even more comfort or even more of the turnaround in, say, US rates and the turnaround in the US dollar, and there's a bit less of any focus on how balance of payments are moving, because that is a very big chunk of a balance of payments that we've been seeing on the services account, you'll see even more of these flows coming out. And that's very good news for those very open economies. Most of the travel spend going into places like Japan, obviously Hong Kong, Australia, Singapore, but also the big one in terms of as a share of even domestic consumer spending would be in Thailand. That then brings us on to the next question that we've been answering in this report, which is what's been recovering of the tourists that have been going out so far. The most rapid recovery has been in experiences over things, which is an interesting part of the story because
traditionally during COVID you got plenty of time to sit online and click buy and do lots of e-commerce, but you can't have experiences.
That's right. And you saw the retailers, including the luxury end, doing very well globally, but including in China. So maybe the tourists weren't able, therefore, to go to, say, Paris or Milan. They were buying domestically. Now this is changing, but the experiences has been the faster recovery part because that's what you could not do during the pandemic, to your point. You couldn't travel, you couldn't have the experiences, and that is the one that has been most persistent in the recovery for most tourists around the world, including even for the outbound tourists we've seen so far from China. Now, the other point I would make, though, is that we know the cost of travel has gone up, and as a result of that, with constrained supply, there's still plenty of consumers...
should have gone down, go figure.
That's right, but at the same time, there's still a constrained supply, the supply side on physical, not just even physical equipment, physical numbers of people, training, the flight hours, so many factors that are there, even say on air flight control out of the US being relatively lower as well. So that's the key thing that I think is going to be the key driver, is whether and when the supply side can come back. But in the meantime, it's the higher income consumers doing more of the travel and spending, and that's also changing some of the ratios of what they're doing when they do travel.